This is a CNIB Lake Joe at Home program. CNIB Lake Joe at Home logo, image description, an illustration of a marshmallow roasting in a campfire with a roof in the background.
Alrighty, hello everyone, it's Emily, and yes, I am currently located at camp. I'm sitting in the learning lab right now in the PCL building. I just made some fresh banana bread, so it smells delicious in here, and we're just welcoming some of our holiday week guests, which is really exciting. So if you haven't met me yet, I am currently the head of sport and adventure for our in-person programming at Lake Joe. I did work on the virtual team for a bit, and I first started with Lake Joe in 2019. But before that, I was a camper for 2 years. I came to the family programs and some of the youth weeks. And I keep coming back because I absolutely love Lake Joe. And one of my favorite things about Lake Joe is seeing it grow over the years and all of the new activities that we have started and watching these programs grow. So I'm really excited to get you all up to speed on five-a-side soccer or blind soccer today. I'm super curious. Has anybody here heard of blind soccer? Anything at all? You can give me a little.
I played at W. Ross. I'm going to take a guess, and also at the W. Ross OBSA sports camp. So what we did was we got to say Roy, and we kicked the ball with the bells in it, and we ran around the gym, and it was fun. Mr. Colazar used to lead us in soccer.
Awesome, that's great to hear. That's okay if you've never heard of it before. It's really new to Canada.
I've never heard of it.
No worries. That's what we're here for. So, to tell you a little bit about it, we're going to go through a couple things today of like, what is five-a-side soccer? Where did it originate? How to play the game, and how we're facilitating at camp. So, to start off with the big question of what is five-a-side soccer? It's also known as blind soccer, and it's became a Paralympic sport in Sydney 2000 Paralympics. So the sport was first played in the late 1920s in Spain, but grew greater prominence in Brazil. So it's really popular in Brazil now, and it's kind of been there since the 1960s. And Brazil actually held their first national championship in 1974. So it's been around for a while, but it became a Paralympic sport just in this century, which is kind of neat. So it is fairly new. The game has rules and field dimensions that are similar to futsal, which is kind of it's a European kind of soccer. And it has a strong focus on the individual ball control and dribbling skills. And as well, it has that additional auditory and blind component. So another fun fact is that Brazil has won gold at the Paralympics in blind soccer ever since 2004. So if there is a place to play blind soccer, it is Brazil. But blind soccer is now played in over 50 countries with a growing number in offering both male and female programs, which is very neat. It is very new to Canada, so we don't have a national team yet. We don't even have a coaching program established, and it's so new. There's a couple recreational leagues in Ontario and BC, but other than that, the sport is not officially played in any capacity. And so since 1996, the sport has been governed internationally by the International Blind Sport Association, who has many other activities, but there has a soccer committee that kind of oversees the rules and sport development, and that's kind of who it falls under in a larger sense. So I'm just gonna skip past some things. So the how to play for blind soccer. The object of five-a-side soccer is the same kind of as regular soccer, with some added rules to ensure player safety. There are 2 teams of 4 that are blindfolded, as well as a sighted goalie. There's some staff that are placed around the field and behind the nets that act as guides for auditory reference. And obviously people are blindfolded. So in terms of equipment and kind of the way this game runs, it uses an audible ball. So it's a size 4 futsal ball. Like I said, futsal is just a sport that's very similar to soccer. And that results in the ball staying to the ground more, because once it gets in the air, it can be very hard to track. So the object is to keep it more on the ground. And then there's actually rattle discs that are stitched into 5 of the panels so that the ball makes noise when it moves. Official futsal balls make actually quite a fair amount of noise when they're on the ground. We have some at Lake Joe that have bells in it and different rattles and kind of different things to try out, because some people like different things, but the international ones are quite loud. The next piece of equipment that is used is eye shades. So if any of you have ever played goal ball, it's very similar to that. And at developmentals, players just wear the eye shades. They take out all of the light to give everyone an even playing field. The only difference with five-a-side soccer is that their eye shades actually go over their nose as well. And that's just to avoid any collisions, that nose is protected. They may also wear concussion like halos around that go around like their forehead to the back of their head to ensure that if they do run into each other, they are being kind of concussion safe. And then at the international and national level competitions, players are also required to have their eyes covered with gauze underneath the eye shades. So that part is very similar to goal ball if you've ever played that before. It's just a piece of gauze with some tape around it. It's not super comfortable, but they do that as well, just to ensure that nobody can see at all. So the field of play, so the field dimensions are 20 meters wide by 40 meters long, and it's very similar to the size of a basketball court. A difference for five-a-side soccer is that the field has kickboards that run along a touchline, so they're about 1 to 1.3 meters high, and they just ensure that the ball doesn't go rolling off the field when it goes out of bounds. So players can actually use them to like kick the ball against and use as like passes, and players can kind of trail them for orientation as well. So they use them as like a point of reference, and some people also use them as assistance in echolocation of knowing where they are. The playing surface for five-a-side soccer is ideally artificial turf, which allows for an even playing surface, making sure that nobody trips, as well as like a hard court surface like a basketball court would play very quickly and increase that like injury risk. So by using a turf, it slows the play down a little bit and ensure that, you know, if anybody were to fall or anything like that, that there is a little bit of that cushion. Goal posts are a little bit different than soccer. I think they're a little bit smaller. They're 3.6 meters wide and 2.14 meters high. If that gives any reference at all, they're about, if I reach my arm up, I can just touch the top, and I'm 5'5". And then they're ideally made of metal, which assists the goal guide when tapping them. So if there's a penalty kick, they'll usually use another metal object to tap on the metal to give a reference point of where the net is. So they're ideally metal so that it makes a very distinct sound. On the pitch, specifically ours that we have here at camp, there is a goal area that is like a 6-meter arc from the goal, and then inside it is a little like 5-meter by 2-meter goalkeeper area. The goalkeeper is actually not allowed to leave this little area. So it's just a rectangle that sits in front of the net, and they are confined to that area for the entirety of the game. And then there is the arc that goes around the box, and that's kind of just like the lines for penalties. But an important piece about blind soccer in terms of the field is that the field is actually split up into 3 thirds. And from one team's point of view, there would be the attacking third, midfield, and the defensive third. So the defensive third being where your net is, the middle portion just being the middle portion, and the attacking third being the net that you're trying to score in. So it's kind of defined in those lines for both knowing where you are, but also in terms of communication. So if you're in your defensive third where your goalie is, your goalie can only talk to you in that third of the field. So as soon as you leave that third of the field, the goalie can't talk to you anymore. And that's just to avoid over communication and too many voices at one time. But then once you move to the middle of the field, that's usually where the head coach is sitting, and they can talk to you in the midfield so that you can, again, get reoriented, know what you need to do, find the ball maybe if it's stopped. But that head coach is kind of responsible for the middle third. And then in the attacking third, you'll have a sighted guide behind the net helping you aim at where the net is. And that is the only person who can talk to you in that third. So if you kind of think about the ends, you have both goalies and guides talking, and then in the middle, you have kind of those coaches. And then referees can talk kind of at any point that is necessary. In addition to having all of those lines on the field and the nets, our field has a couple unique things about it. One, that it has a bright yellow CNIB Lake Joe logo in the middle, and the field itself is kind of located where the old mini putt used to be, and it's right beside the rock wall if you haven't seen it yet at camp. But then we also have an outer ridge of the field that's about 2 feet wide. I believe it's yellow as well. And it's actually got a harder turf, and it actually is supposed to feel different under your feet so that you know you're at the edge of the field. Now, that is to say, if you're running very quickly, you're probably not going to notice the difference, but it is a very unique little feature about our field. All right, now in terms of players for five-a-side soccer, as I mentioned, there's 4 outfield players per team, each wearing those eye shades. Fun fact is that at the international level, it's not specified as a men's team really or a women's team. It's usually played just co-ed because of the lack of players at this time. And then a team in total is consistent of 8 players. So that would be 4 players that are on the field plus a goalie, which is 5. And then there's probably 3 people sitting on the bench that may sub in and out throughout the game. Speaking of goalkeepers, they're the only sighted player on the team. At an international level, they can't have played for more than 5 years professionally. So you kind of get, again, that like even playing field, especially because the nets are smaller and harder to aim at when you can't see. You don't want some professional goalie who's been doing this for 20 years necessarily on your team. As I mentioned, they can't leave the penalty area, and they can only communicate within the players that are in the defensive zone. So the players that are trying to block the other team from the net, that's who the goalie can communicate with. The next player involved in this game is the head coach. So that's the person who will organize the entire team. And as I mentioned, they're in that midfield zone, so the middle third of the field, and that's when they can communicate. But otherwise, they actually don't enter the field of play really at all. The next player, sort of, is the sighted guides, and they're located behind the opposing goal. So if you're the team that's playing on the left half of the field, they're going to be standing behind the right net, so the net that you're aiming at, and they are limited to a zone behind the goal as well. So they can't leave the goal, they can't really step onto the field at all. And they're identified by wearing a bib that actually says guide printed on it so that everybody knows exactly who the guide is in terms of gameplay. And then they can only communicate with players who are in that attacking zone as well. In terms of who is running this game, there are match officials. We actually just certified some at a weekend here at Lake Joe a little while ago that I'll talk about a bit later. But there's usually about 5 officials per game. 2 of them will be on the field, you know, tracing the ball, watching players. One of them will manage the substitutions, so players that are coming on and off the field. And then one will be like the timekeeper and scorekeeper. Their job is really just to enforce the laws of the game and monitor the use of the word voy. So as Kyle kind of said earlier, voy is the word that is used to define where players are. And it's something you have to say if you're within a 2-meter radius of the ball. So if you are close to the ball, you have to say it so that players know where you are, and it's not like a sneaky steal or anything. Okay, so in terms of actually playing the game, usually when an official game is going on, both teams will walk on from either corner of the field to the center. They'll get a little introduction by whoever's running it. And then a coin toss will be done to determine which team is going to get the ball first. And the team who gets the first ball must complete a forward pass to one of their teammates. So the person will get the ball, they'll kick it to a teammate, and then all the players are allowed to kind of move around, try and steal the ball, try and kick it into the net, while all saying voy and having their bumpers up. So if you don't know what that is, putting your bumpers up just essentially means that there's two hands in front of you, one just below face height and one around chest height. And it's just so that if you were to collide with anybody, it's your hands making contact first, not your face or your body that could potentially get injured. So players are saying voy, they've got their bumpers up, they are moving around pretty quickly. And players can communicate throughout the entire game, wherever they are on the field, at any time. A couple more little fun facts and rules. The goalie can only throw the ball in, they can never kick it. And when a ball goes out of bounds,
to learn more about CNIB Lake Joe at home programs,
if the board
visit
does sneak out of a corner,
CNIBLakeJoe.ca.
the kickboards on the edges only go to the ends, they don't go by the nets. It's not like an enclosed box. So if by chance the ball does go out of bounds, or maybe somebody even kicked it over the kickboards, I've seen that happen too, then the opposing team will just get to kick that in before the ball can keep going. If the ball stops moving at any point, a referee or a guide, whoever's kind of near it, will give it a little shake with their foot to just indicate where it is. And obviously, when the ball goes into the net, the scoring team will be awarded 1 point. I don't know the exact length of games. I think they're around like those 24-minute halves or something. They're pretty long as well. But yeah. So that's kind of rules of the game, how the game kind of works, what a game might look like. And now I have to say, I personally also had no knowledge of five-a-side soccer prior to May of this year. So from May 6th to 8th, CNIB Lake Joe hosted a first of its kind in Canada training weekend for five-a-side soccer. So we had about 10 players, so individuals who are blind, who've been actually playing recreationally out of either Pickering or London or Toronto. And then there was about 15 people who were here to learn how to coach the sport, that group which I was a part of. And then there was about 5 people who were here to learn the rules to be able to referee. So this weekend was really cool because there was people who had played the sport before, but there was also a lot of people who had never played before, and they got a chance to learn and kind of figure out how they could take that back into their communities, which was very neat. We had the pleasure of welcoming one of the head coaches of the France team, Charlie, and he was here with us all weekend telling us all about his tips and tricks. And he was telling us that France has like 14 national teams. So they've really figured out what they're doing over there. And he was able to share a lot of what he knew about the sport and playing it for a while with us because we were all so new to it. And then we spent most of the weekend just kind of learning the game, learning what the rules were. We learned a lot from each other and just watching some of the players play and how they navigated the field. So like I said, currently in Ontario, there are some recreational clubs. There's one in Pickering and North York that run consistently right now. They like get together almost every weekend, which is really neat that they get to do that. But it's just very recreational. It was the person who kind of runs that is actually from England. And so he brought over his European five-a-side soccer knowledge to us, which is very, very cool. But CNIB Lake Joe was very happy to be able to host that first ever weekend on our brand new pitch and give people the opportunity to learn the sport and kind of get involved, which is really neat that we got to do that, and I'm so thankful to have been a part of that, because it means that as the head of sport and adventure, I'm really able to bring five-a-side soccer to life through our camp programs. So as I said, this week we're welcoming Holiday Week for the first time. And Holiday Week and Family Week, in terms of our camp programming, are going to run very similarly. So for those weeks, we're mostly just going to have drop-in learning sessions where people can drop in, they can learn how to play the sport, practice some of those skills, and we'll probably run it a couple times throughout the week, with potentially a tournament at the end of the week where families or groups of people can play against each other in an actual game, which will be really neat. For our adult programs, we're going to be running drop-in sessions as well throughout the week, so that you guys can get a taste, try it, practice some of those skills as well if you're looking to get your hands on a soccer ball, and really just giving the opportunity for people to experience the sport as it is so new, and as well as maybe connect them to some of the places that are trying to implement this sport. So during our Sockability weekend, there was a lot of people from London who were here, and they were looking to start up a recreational club once they had gone home. So potentially connecting people to those resources where they can play outside of camp now that they've gotten just a little taste while they're here. But a week that I'm really excited for is actually starting a week today. Our play and camp abilities groups are coming. Play is one of just our active youth camps, and they're going to get the opportunity to try five-a-side soccer as well. But for camp abilities, it is a sport specialized week. So they will learn for the morning block of our program, so 9:30 to 12:30 every day. They will be very immersed in the sport. We're going to spend like the entire 3 hours on the field. And they'll really get to build those skills and try new things throughout the week to hopefully end up with a game that they can play at the end. And then they as well will be given those resources that they can get involved in at home, or how they can bring this into their community, which is really neat. So I'm really excited that they will get to really continue it and see that progression over the week. And this is the first time that we're running this here at camp, which I think will be a lot of fun. Now, I know most of you are probably not coming to the Camp Abilities program. If you are, that's very neat. I look forward to seeing you. But I figure most of you are probably going to be in those adult weeks, those family weeks, maybe even a holiday week. So what you may encounter in a drop-in session are things like learning to get to know the field, learning how to dribble, practicing tracking the ball and other players, so saying that like voy. Maybe if you've never run with a blindfold on, we'll give that a try. And then things like passing to different players, which again turns to like locating that ball when it's in an open space, practicing shooting on the net. And then if we get to it, talking about those rules and potentially playing a game if people are really, really interested. I think it's important to note that the goal of running soccer at camp is not necessarily to feed the professionals of tomorrow. While we hope to give people an introduction to the sport, it really is just about encouraging physical activity that is accessible and inclusive to our camp population. And we want to give access to sports that maybe people have never tried before. So, while people may want to get involved at home, it's not necessarily at this point, a long-term development program, but who knows, maybe we'll get there. And it's kind of like some other one-of-a-kind sports that we have at camp, like baseball, and I know we're getting some frisbee golf. So really just being able to give you all the opportunity to try it and try something new and in a safe and supportive way. So that is all I have to say about the sport itself, how it works. And I would love to open the floor up to questions about the game, whether I can answer them or not, as well as any questions about our camp programs or what that'll look like this year.
Okay, so I forgot, I haven't played in a long time. Last time I played, it was at W. Ross, but for the blindfold, do totally blind people also have to wear the blindfold like goal ball?
Yes, they do. There is actually different rules and regulations for the international level where I believe at the Paralympics, only B1s can compete, period. Now at some like national levels, there are like, or like the World Cup kind of division, there are levels for like B2s and B3s, but I believe at the Paralympics right now, that was like the thing I was most shocked about being told was that only B1s can compete at the Paralympics for five-a-side soccer right now. And yes, they all still wear blindfolds. I see a hand from Marsha and Butch.
Yeah, so I'm not able to run, so I wouldn't be able to play the game, right?
You can absolutely give it a try in one of our drop-in sessions, Martha. We will work at what your pace is, and if you just want to kick the ball back and forth, or we had some kids come and they just wanted to like sit on the ground and roll it back and forth, and we'll work with you to give you the opportunity to try it. You don't have to do it competitively at all.
Okay, because I wondered, because I'd like to try it, but I'm a runner. I can walk pretty fast, but
we'll get you a speed walking group. No, you don't have to run at all. Especially if we're not getting to like that game point, to just try it and try kicking the ball around. No, I don't like running either, so.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. All right, Tiff.
Yeah, I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you're blindfolded, how is that gonna work when you run? So you don't run into anyone. Is there anyone?
Yeah. So everybody who's moving around the field will be saying the word "voy," V-O-Y, and it actually means "I arrive" in Spanish. And you can actually get a penalty for not saying "boy" if you're within 2 meters of the ball. But players say that as they move around so they don't run into each other.
So you have to say the word "boy" then?
Yeah, V-O-Y,
Okay.
boy, the entire time.
So the entire time you're running?
Yep.
Okay.
Emily, you also mentioned the bumpers, so I feel like that would also help with not running into
the bumpers
people.
will be up as well. If you do happen to kind of wander into somebody, you're hitting them with your hands first, not your face or anything.
So when you say "voy" when you're running, do you say it over and over again?
You do.
Or do you go "boy"?
No, it's
"boy,
boy, boy, boy." As people are moving, it is fairly quick. Nobody's really sitting there going "boy." I mean, I don't know if they get a penalty for that, but yeah.
Very cool.
How big
Does
is
anyone else? Yeah,
Marsha?
go ahead, Marsha.
How big is the soccer ball?
The soccer ball, I would say it's probably about 1/2 foot wide, like in diameter. It's not super big, but it's about the same size as like a regular soccer ball, a little bit smaller than a basketball. Yeah.
I never held a soccer ball, so
That's okay. Half a foot in diameter is, yeah, I think pretty accurate.
Okay. And is there special footwear you gotta wear?
Ooh, great question. So, fun fact, in five-a-side soccer internationally, you're not allowed to wear cleats. It's not allowed. And that's just because if you were to step on somebody else's foot or kick somebody by accident, it would hurt a lot more. So they just wear regular running shoes to play. So they would also wear shin pads for that, again, that like potentially kicking each other, but just regular running shoes.
Okay.
Are there there any other questions from anyone?
Everybody's quiet.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, I guess we will say thank you to Emilee for that.
I have a question of who's excited to come play soccer at camp?
Yay, I am.
I want to. I really want to.
That's good to hear. Oh, Mark had put his hand up.
Hi, thanks for the explanation there, Emilee. I gained a much better understanding of the sport. That was awesome. But I did have a question though. You were mentioning if you don't say boy as you're coming down the playing surface, you're assessed a penalty.
Yeah, so if you're within 2 meters of the ball and you don't say boy, it does result in a penalty. And I believe it's just the penalties stack up. And then if you get a certain number of warnings from the referees, then you get subbed. But yeah, you can, that is, I think probably the biggest rule in five-a-side soccer and reason for penalties is just people not saying boy, because it is that communication of where you are to other people for both safety of not running into each other, but also just fairness of play. It's not exactly fair for somebody to run up to somebody else and steal that ball because they had no idea that they were there. But yeah.
Of course. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I know. I was just wondering what the actual if you did get a penalty, what the sort of infraction was, if you were given a yellow card or red card, or if you were given maybe a 2-minute, have to leave the playing surface. But if
that sounds like that's right.
No, that makes sense. Cool.
Oh, one more question, Emilee. What part of the foot do you kick the soccer ball with?
That's a great question. You kick the soccer ball with the inside of your foot. So that kind of arc between your big toe and heel, that's where you want to keep the ball. So dribbling is actually just kind of running while pushing that ball back and forth between that part of your foot. So you go from the left foot to the right foot and kind of move it forward, which is really cool. And yeah, we kick it with the inside so that we don't kick it really high, because if you kicked it with your toe too close, you might kick it up in the air. But also for better ball control so that you have kind of a wider space of your foot to use.
Okay.
Great question.
Emilee, there was a comment or a question in the chat from Tiffany, and the question was, if you get a goal, will the goalie say goal and who got the goal?
Yes, the referees should be responsible for saying that. The goalie may also say as well. I don't think it's at least at our camp, it won't be too formal of who will say that, but yes, we will say.
And if it's professional soccer, would be goal.
Yeah, you'd hear the crowd roar and yeah.
All right.
Good question.
If there was a goal, then it counts as a no goal. Will it be a no goal?
Yeah, so if they did kick it and it didn't go into the goal nets, we're lucky that we have these kind of this large meshing behind our goal nets where it'll kind of hit that and not roll too far away, hopefully. But if it did hit that, it would just be probably a whistle blown and they'd say out of bounds, and then that's when somebody would get a kick in.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know about cleats. That is good to know.
Yeah.
Thinking it.
Well, because people were asking, they're like, "Oh, should I wear cleats?" And no,
yeah.
running shoes all the way, which is great. You don't have to buy anything else.
Well, and I just think of all the time and effort and the cost actually of that special turf for this special pitch. You don't want to chew it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna have to get special shirts made, some special. What will the Lake Joe soccer team be called? That's what we'll have to.
We'll see what the capabilities group comes up with next week further.
Okay.
Emilee, it's Jessica. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
In normal, typical soccer, they have like shin guards, like leg guards.
Mhm.
In the higher up ranks, do players wear those still?
Yeah, shin guards are definitely recommended for those accidental. I went to go kick the ball, but I actually kicked you. I played blind soccer once with Camp Abilities in 2018, and it was a very makeshift game, but I do vividly remember kicking one of my fellow players right around the knee, and I left like an egg-sized bruise on them. So, yeah.
So maybe that's the other thing too, right, Emilee? The soccer pitch, and maybe you mentioned this, isn't as big as sort of soccer pitches that people might be used to. I think 5-a-side is a smaller, so you maybe don't have to.
I think it's a little bit smaller, not overly smaller, but definitely a little bit smaller.
Yeah. So you don't have to kick it like you're sending it.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. My wheels are turning about the team name. That's for me.
Lake Joe Strikers.
Something, yes.
Or the Lake Joe Football Club.
There you go.
FC.
LJFC.
Okay.
Yeah.
That has a ring to it. I like it. All
We'll
right,
see
my
what the
friends. Does anyone have any other questions? We're on a roll because every time I say this, someone does have other questions.
One more
They're
thing.
good questions too.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, Emilee.
Might actually be it. No.
There we go.
I think that was Alessia.
Yeah, it was me. I got a question. Just when I go to school, and we play blind soccer, is there bells in the ball or no?
So some of them have bells, but more commonly they have this kind of rattle. So I don't know the mechanics of it, but they're like sewn into the edge of the ball, and they rattle when they move. I should have.
Yeah, so like they make noises. Yeah.
Yeah, they make noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tiff's got her hand up again.
You got a question, Tiffany?
Well, when I was hearing Alessia, I'm thinking, how can deaf people hear that? The rattle in the ball.
That's a great question, because that actually did come up when we were playing with our staff team last week, because we do have one of our staff who's deafblind, and we hadn't figured out a solution for it yet, is the short answer of I don't know how somebody who's deafblind would play this, because it is kind of attuned to that auditory component. So I don't know. I think it may just depend on the person and what their abilities are.
Yeah, there's a real range, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, sight loss and hearing loss.
Think about too, I guess.
Maybe that's something else we need to think about as we're playing at camp. How would we do this if we had a friend with hearing loss we wanted to participate? Tiffany, did you have another question, or do you still have your same hand up?
I was actually wondering, like, would there be like breaks in between if there's like 3 games or whatever? Or
someone's going to be there with orange slices.
Alice will be there with water station and.
Awesome. All right, another call. Last call for questions. Okay. Well,
Right,
thank you
we'll
very
wrap it
much,
there.
Emilee.
Do they blow a whistle in soccer or what?
I do have a whistle, and I do love to blow it a lot. However, when we're doing our drop-in sessions at Lake Joe, we do kind of tell people that the whistle is more so for safety. rather than, refs would use it in a game to say, like, they'd probably blow the whistle when a goal is scored or when they have to pause the game for any reason. But when we're kind of teaching it, we're using it as a safety mechanism. So usually if you do hear the whistle, it means stop immediately. You're either going to run off the field or you're going to run into somebody, and it's kind of a safety concern for us.
Okay.
But yes, we do have whistles.
Looking forward to meeting you, Emilee, and trying
Me
to
too,
solve.
Marsha. I can't wait. I'm getting really excited.
Yeah.
I get to come next week.
Yay!
Yeah.
All right, last hand from Randy.
Yes, I just wonder if there was any penalties. Is there any minutes might be involved?
Sorry, is there any what that might be involved?
Any minutes, like if you get a penalty.
Yeah, there definitely is. I don't know the logistics of that. I was just at the weekend from a coaching perspective, not a refereeing perspective, but there most definitely probably is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
To learn more about CNIB Lake Joe at-home programs, visit CNIBLakeJoe.ca.